On the distant crystalline planet of Velastra, the royal palace gleamed like 1,000 frozen stars. Its towers and spires rose high above the clouds, reflecting the planet's twin suns in a dazzling array of colors. It was a place of power and pride, where the ruling family's lineage was measured not only in age but in strength, intelligence, and the capacity to inspire fear or admiration. Among these rulers was a princess unlike any other, small, delicate, and considered weak by nearly everyone around her. Her name was Lyra. Lyra's size had always been a topic of whispers in the halls of the palace. She was shorter than her peers, her frame fragile compared to the towering bodies of other Velastran nobles. Many viewed her with disdain, a princess who could never fulfill the duties expected of her. Each season, when eligible males came forward for alliances or marriage, Lyra was overlooked. Some didn't even bother to greet her. They considered her an embarrassment, a symbol of what happens when bloodlines produce an anomaly. Even her own advisors and relatives referred to her with careful pity or scorn, speaking in hushed tones about how she could never lead, never defend, and never inspire the respect necessary for a royal figure. Yet Lyra did not resent her condition. She spent her days in quiet observation, studying the palace and its people. She knew she lacked physical strength, but she possessed a mind keen for strategy, a heart that understood empathy, and a spirit that refused to bow simply because others deemed her unworthy. Still, she often wondered if anyone would ever see her for more than her size, if anyone would value her for her mind or her courage. The arrival of the human delegation caused a stir throughout Velastra. Humans were rare visitors to this planet. They were tall, soft-spoken, and utterly alien in their ways, and Velastrans had long regarded them with a mix of curiosity and caution. The human ships had landed in the central courtyard, their engines barely making a sound against the crystal stone. Guards and nobles alike crowded around the newcomers, eager to observe, evaluate, and in some cases intimidate. Among the humans was Ethan Hale, a man of calm demeanor and quiet strength. Unlike the warriors of his delegation, he carried no armor, no weapons, and no attempt at asserting dominance. He was an engineer, a thinker, someone accustomed to solving problems with intellect rather than violence. When he first stepped into the palace hall, he felt the eyes of hundreds upon him, curious, skeptical, and occasionally hostile. Yet his gaze was drawn not to the tallest or most radiant figures, but to a small princess standing slightly apart from the crowd. Her posture was composed, her expression polite, yet there was a hint of loneliness in her eyes that made him pause. Lyra noticed him almost immediately. Humans were strange, and she had expected them to ignore her just like every other alien male had done. But Ethan approached her. He did not bow excessively, nor did he speak in condescending tones. He simply asked, "May I speak with you?" There was no pretense, no expectation, only genuine curiosity. Lyra was taken aback. She had never had someone, let alone a male from another world, ask to speak with her with such sincerity. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lyra met in quiet corners of the palace. He asked about her life, her observations, and her thoughts on Velastran society. She spoke cautiously at first, unsure if he would dismiss her like the others, but Ethan listened intently, nodding, asking questions that revealed he valued her mind. For the first time, Lyra felt seen, not as a weak princess, not as an object for alliance or duty, but as a person with ideas, with insight, with worth beyond appearances. Word spread quickly among the court. A human was speaking with the tiny princess. The Velastran nobles laughed behind closed doors or expressed outrage at what they considered an insult to tradition. The human has no right, some said. He chooses the one who cannot lead, cannot fight, cannot inspire respect. Lyra tried to ignore the whispers, but their sting lingered. Even Ethan, who seemed immune to Velastran judgment, could not erase the years of doubt she carried about herself. The palace prepared for the season's public display, a demonstration of power where eligible males showed their prowess in combat and control over energy crystals, the lifeblood of Velastran authority. Lyra was not invited to participate. She stood in the shadows watching her taller, stronger relatives perform feats of agility, strength, and skill that drew gasps and admiration. She felt the familiar ache of exclusion. She wished for just a moment that she could join them, that she could prove herself worthy of attention. But she knew her body could not match theirs. As the demonstration progressed, an energy crystal malfunctioned. A sharp pulse echoed through the arena, followed by a series of sparks and cracks in the floor. The massive crystal that powered the central platform began to destabilize, its energy threatening to explode. Panic spread among the nobles and warriors. Many froze, unsure how to react, their training insufficient for the unexpected crisis. Lyra's mind, however, raced. She had spent countless hours studying the behavior of energy crystals, learning their rhythms and patterns in secret. She stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the chaos. Adjust the alignment. Channel the resonance from the smaller nodes to the core. She gestured toward the array of secondary crystals, her instructions precise, logical, and calm. Most ignored her, thinking her suggestions irrelevant. But Ethan listened. Without hesitation, he moved to follow her guidance, adjusting the interface on the stabilizing panel. Step by step, he mirrored her instructions, carefully redirecting energy flow. Slowly, the crystal's pulses began to normalize. The arena stopped shaking, the sparks ceased, and the platform steadied. A stunned silence fell across the court. The crowd, initially frozen in fear, now stared at the small princess and the human who had acted on her orders. For a moment, no one spoke. The nobles had witnessed the impossible. Lyra, the tiny princess no alien male had chosen, had saved the demonstration through intellect and quick thinking. And the human had trusted her completely, acting without hesitation. Ethan turned to the council and said firmly, "I choose her as my ally." His voice carried over the assembly, clear and unwavering. Gasps echoed throughout the arena. Whispers swirled like wind in the crystalline towers. A human chose her? He trusts her mind? The tiny princess? A savior? Lyra froze, her heart pounding. No one had ever spoken of her in such terms before. She looked at Ethan, whose expression was calm, reassuring, and without a trace of judgment. For the first time, she felt a spark of hope, a possibility that someone might see her not as weak but as capable, intelligent, and deserving of choice. The nobles were divided. Some saw the declaration as scandalous, a challenge to Velestran tradition. Others, secretly impressed, began to reconsider their assumptions. Lord Varen, a tall and imposing figure with ambitions of his own, narrowed his eyes. He did not like the human's audacity, nor the attention Lyra had suddenly garnered. In his mind, no human had the right to interfere in Velestran affairs, let alone choose a princess whom they deemed unworthy. But he remained silent for now, waiting for an opportunity to assert his authority. Lyra felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. She wanted to believe in Ethan's choice, in the chance for something different, something genuine. But years of being overlooked and dismissed had left scars. She worried that he would regret his decision once the court fully comprehended the implications, that she would once again be cast aside. Yet Ethan's calm gaze reassured her, and slowly a small smile touched her lips. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had finally found someone who could see beyond the surface. In the following days, Lyra and Ethan spent more time together, quietly exploring the palace and the surrounding crystalline gardens. They spoke of technology, of history, and of the ways in which societies judged worth. Lyra found herself laughing in a way she had never dared before, her small frame moving with newfound confidence. For the first time, she felt that her mind, her courage, and her spirit mattered. She was no longer invisible, no longer dismissed, and no longer without an ally who respected her fully. The court, meanwhile, buzzed with rumors. Some nobles whispered that Lyra's rise in prominence was dangerous, that a human choosing her might upset the delicate balance of power. Others secretly admired her, seeing the potential for a princess who relied not on brute strength but on intelligence and heart. The tension in the palace was palpable, but Lyra refused to let it shake her. She had survived exclusion, ridicule, and doubt. Now, with Ethan by her side, she felt prepared to face whatever challenges came next. As the suns of Velastra dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the crystalline spires, Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the city. She felt the cool wind against her face, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was valued, where she was seen, where she was chosen, not because she was tall, strong, or impressive by tradition, but because she was herself. Beside her, Ethan adjusted a small device on the balcony railing, smiling as he watched her eyes light up with hope. In that quiet moment, Amidst the glow of the twin suns and the shimmer of crystal towers, Lyra realized that everything was changing. Not because the court decided it, not because tradition demanded it, but because a human had made a choice. And that choice more than any test of. The palace of Velastra had never been quieter at night. The crystalline towers reflected the twin moons, bathing the corridors in a soft, silvery light. For Lyra, sleep was elusive. The events of the past days swirled endlessly in her mind. A human, Ethan, had chosen her. A small princess dismissed by her own people had finally been acknowledged, not out of pity but out of respect and trust. Yet despite the warmth of his confidence, doubts lingered. Would the council accept this? Would the nobles? And what of Lord Varen, whose eyes had burned with disapproval the moment Ethan had spoken? Morning arrived with a tense hush over the palace. Word of Ethan's declaration had spread through the city like wildfire. Merchants whispered in the streets, palace servants gossiped in hallways, and guards spoke in low tones of the human who dared to choose the tiny princess. Some found hope in it, imagining a new era where intelligence and courage mattered more than strength alone. Others, particularly the traditionalists, saw it as an affront to centuries of Velastran custom. Lyra dressed carefully in her ceremonial attire, the fabric shimmering like liquid crystal across her small frame. She had once thought such clothing would feel like a cage, a reminder of her inadequacy. Now with Ethan beside her, it felt almost like armor of a different kind, one forged not of strength but of confidence and resolve. She found him waiting near the palace balcony, studying an intricate device he had brought from his ship. It was simple to him, but to Lyra, it radiated ingenuity, the kind of brilliance that humans carried in ways Velastrans rarely could understand. "Ready?" Ethan asked, glancing at her with a soft smile. Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath. "I think I'm ready for whatever comes next." They entered the main hall together. The council was already assembled, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, shock, and barely contained disapproval. Lord Varen sat at the head, his tall form dominating the chamber. He rose as they approached, his voice smooth but sharp. "Human," he said, "you have made a declaration that cannot be ignored. But do you truly understand the consequences of choosing a Velastran princess whom no male has found worthy? This is not merely your concern. This affects generations of alliances, traditions, and power." Ethan met his gaze calmly. "I understand perfectly. I also understand that worth is not measured in height or strength. Lyra has proven her intelligence, her courage, and her ability to act decisively when others could not. I chose her because she is capable. Not because she is tall or strong, but because she is herself." A murmur ran through the council. Some were impressed. Others were outraged. Lord Varen's eyes narrowed. "You presume to defy tradition, yet you admit the princess herself has done nothing to test her capabilities. You risk making a mockery of Velastran custom." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly. "I have tested myself every day of my life. I may not be the tallest or strongest, but I can think, plan, and act. I saved the arena when the crystal malfunctioned. If my choice is to be questioned, let my actions speak." The room fell into silence. Few had expected Lyra to confront the council with such poise. Ethan's presence beside her gave her courage, and for the first time, she realized that being small did not mean being powerless. Lord Varen's expression darkened, his mind already turning to how he might challenge them. That challenge came sooner than anyone expected. Varen proposed a trial, not of brute strength but of skill and strategy, to see if Lyra and Ethan could harmonize under pressure. The council agreed, intrigued by the idea of testing this unusual pair. Lyra, though nervous, accepted. She insisted that the challenge be one of intellect and coordination, not of combat. The council, surprised but intrigued, approved her request. The trial was to be conducted in the Crystal Resonance Chamber, a place where energy flows could be manipulated through thought, precision, and cooperation. Few had ever succeeded, as the chamber demanded perfect synchronization between partners. Lyra and Ethan entered the chamber, facing a massive crystal core surrounded by smaller nodes. Their task was to stabilize the core's energy without causing it to overheat and explode. Varen sneered from the observation gallery. "They will fail. The human will falter and the princess will prove herself unfit." Lyra glanced at Ethan. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Always," he replied. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only trust. The trial began. The core pulsed with unstable energy, and the smaller nodes blinked erratically. Lyra guided Ethan's hands to the control interface. Step by step, they adjusted frequencies, synchronized pulses, and carefully distributed energy flows. Farron watched, expecting mistakes, but none came. Their minds worked together as one, understanding the core's rhythm intuitively. Minutes passed, each one stretching into an eternity. Sweat formed on Lyra's brow and Ethan's jaw tensed slightly, yet their coordination never faltered. Finally, the core stabilized, its light calming to a steady glow. The chamber hummed quietly, the resonance perfect. They had succeeded. The observation gallery erupted into stunned silence. Even the council members who had doubted Lyra could not hide their astonishment. Lord Varen's jaw tightened. He had expected failure, yet the pair had not only succeeded but had done so flawlessly. Lyra's small frame glowed faintly under the chamber's light, radiating calm confidence that no Velastran had seen before. Ethan stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "See, you were never weak." "They just refused to see." Lyra smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. "Thank you for believing in me." The council convened immediately after the trial. They were divided. Some argued that Ethan's choice was unconventional but acceptable given Lyra's demonstrated abilities. Others remained reluctant, unwilling to accept that tradition could be challenged. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Lyra had proven herself not through height or strength but through intellect, courage, and determination. Ethan had proven that humans could see worth in ways Velastrans often ignored. Over the following weeks, the palace adjusted to the new reality. Nobles who had mocked Lyra now approached with cautious respect. Many still struggled to reconcile centuries of tradition with the undeniable fact that the tiny princess had triumphed. But slowly attitudes began to shift. Lyra walked the halls with her head held high, no longer shrinking from the gazes of others. She had allies now, not just Ethan but those who had begun to see her true value. Outside the palace, the people of Velastra watched with fascination. Word of the human who chose Lyra spread across the city. Merchants spoke of her courage and intelligence. Citizens whispered that perhaps the old ways needed reconsideration. The tiny princess, once dismissed and overlooked, had become a symbol of change, not because of her size, but because of the choices she made and the trust she inspired. Ethan and Lyra spent many hours together exploring the planet. He showed her devices from his world, explained principles of engineering and physics in ways that intrigued her, and challenged her to think differently about energy, structure, and innovation. Lyra, in turn, shared her knowledge of Velastran customs, history, and the subtle ways the council manipulated power. Together they became a team, complementing each other, learning from each other, and growing stronger with every passing day. One evening, as the twin moons reflected off the crystalline towers, Lyra and Ethan stood atop the highest balcony of the palace. The wind was gentle, carrying the faint hum of the city below. Lyra turned to him, her eyes shining with emotion. "I never imagined anyone would choose me," she said softly. "Not because of duty, not because of expectation, but because they saw me." Ethan smiled. "You deserve to be seen. You always have. I just happened to be the one who noticed first." Lyra laughed lightly, a sound that carried the promise of newfound confidence. "Then you have changed my life in ways I cannot even describe." "And you've changed mine," he replied. "I came here to observe and learn, but I never expected to find someone who could teach me so much about courage, intelligence, and heart." Their bond, forged in moments of crisis, strengthened by mutual respect and validated by triumph, became a quiet legend in the palace. Humans and Velastrans alike watched as tradition began to shift, recognizing that strength could take many forms and worth was not always measured by size, power, or lineage. Lord Varen, though still bitter, could no longer argue with the facts. Lyra had proven herself beyond question, and Ethan's choice had highlighted a new perspective, one where intelligence, courage, and trust mattered as much, if not more, than physical might or societal expectation. Months passed, and Velastra began to see the first signs of change. Councils began to incorporate new ideas, nobles started to value intellect alongside tradition, and the citizens whispered about the tiny princess who had defied the odds. Lyra moved through the palace confidently, guiding discussions, advising leaders, and inspiring young Velastrans who had always been overlooked. Ethan remained by her side, not as a protector in the traditional sense, but as a partner who respected her mind and heart. Together they had faced judgment, crisis, and skepticism, and emerged victorious. Lyra, once unwanted and dismissed, now stood tall in the eyes of all who had once doubted her, not because she had changed, but because the world had finally learned to see her true worth. In the quiet moments when